Hey Mark, Mike Skeen here for Racers360. Thank you for sending in your video on board your Corvette at New Jersey. Looks like a great lap. Honestly, very good driving. I've watched it through a couple of times. Very helpful with the data. I love the race render that you're using. And like I said, very good laps here. So we're definitely going to be starting to get into the nitty gritty a little bit, starting to find some real details in the data. But I think there's definitely some stuff here that will get you a little bit more time. Some of it is, it's hard without like a pro lap to compare against. But I think even just looking at your driving and going through the data here on the video, I think we've definitely found a few things that should help you out. So let's go ahead and hit play and start working our way through the lap. As we get down to turn one, just looking at the brake trace, obviously pretty big spike. Maybe could be a little bit quicker. It seems like still a little bit, kind of a slow ramp up. But again, I don't know exactly how it would compare with different, whether it's this type of data rendering, if it maybe stretches it out a little bit. But in general, very good, nice high peak, and then trailing off. We do see a couple little spikes throughout where you're rolling your foot on the brakes, I guess, to do the blip. Not too uncommon, but we want to try to keep that as linear as possible. But pretty good brake point. I like the turn in, getting it down to the curbing. One thing I see as we watch your throttle trace a lot here throughout the lap is how you very quickly go to partial throttle, but then a lot of times it takes a long time to get to 100% throttle. So I'm just going to take out my pin here and do a little drawing. A lot of times it's actually better to wait, or sometimes if you're this early on throttle, it can be an indicator that you're a little bit slow, on your rolling speed coming into the corner. So ideally, I'd like to see maybe this brake release come just a little bit longer. Not quite all the way to the apex, but maybe just a little bit longer, so we're rolling in a little bit higher entry speed. And again, you're not reaching your minimum until you're right down at the end of that brake release. So that would put you closer to your apex where you're, slowing all the way down. And then also your throttle will start just fractionally later, but then it'll start to climb to 100% throttle a lot sooner. So you want to, not plateau as much on the way up to 100%. It may, have a little flat spot where you kind of do one of these or something like that, but it shouldn't be multiple seconds. And so if I clear this off and play it forward, I'm just going to inch through frame by frame. So you go through the apex, still more or less flat line on the throttle. You start to pick it up a little bit, but still, maybe 2/3 throttle. You're not 100% until you're there, basically at the track out. And so we'd like to see it a lot sooner than that. I would say in one of these cars, you should be full throttle, probably halfway out, or pretty close after the apex. So right here where you start to go up, from call it half to 2/3 throttle, I would probably be starting to see full throttle. You're pretty quick. And again, that may mean this tip-in portion is too early because you're taking weight off of the front, and so you're reducing the car's capability to turn through the middle of the corner by going power too early. So sometimes a little patience with that tip-in, waiting just a little longer, will help you climb to full throttle a little bit sooner. And we're going to hit that point a couple of times throughout the lap here. But then as we go into two, you see not even 100% off the throttle, and then a long time at this V-min here where we're just kind of holding steady, 88 miles an hour now. Just inch it through 87, 86. And this is kind of just tire scrub and starting to go uphill. So even though you're adding power, you're still decelerating 80 miles an hour. And now you're starting to accelerate. So as we get back to half throttle, we're starting to pick it up, but we're really almost at track out, and you're starting to reach the crest of the hill. And then get a little stab, but you're hesitant and still there. Once you are all the way onto the track out curve is where we go 100% and really start accelerating again. So a lot of time spent there at partial throttle and very close to minimum speed, and it makes your minimum speed quite late in the corner, really just before the crest of the hill there. So what I would suggest is probably driving in a little further on full throttle and then making a bigger lift. And so what I would see is probably full throttle a little longer to roughly where we are, about where our turn in is, and then it would drop off and probably go down, at, probably to 0, maybe not quite there, but then it would start to build back up much more quickly. And so you get a little bit more mile an hour on entry because you're staying on throttle full time, for a longer period. But then your bigger lift is going to allow more rotation. And so, once you're getting kind of middle of the corner, you're putting a lot more weight on the front ends, getting that car rotated earlier in the corner, which gets you straighter for the drive off. So you can start to build power. And it may not look exactly like this. It may be a little bit more gradual lifting off so that, you're not upsetting the car too much. But I would definitely like to see you at least closer to all the way off throttle so that you start to build that full throttle quicker. And it's not always a bad thing to brake too, just a tiny little bit, so say you drive it in a lot deeper, but then you give it just a tiny little, blip of brake pressure to let it slow it down and set the nose in a little bit. That might also get you back to full throttle sooner, but we definitely don't want to see these long troughs of, partial throttle there. Get back to driving the video. Line-wise, though, pretty happy with that. The only thing I might say is a little bit wider on the track-out curb would be okay. Usually most of the car out there, I would say, but really not too bad. Pretty good line through there. And then same kind of tendency here where I would like to see you come all the way off the throttle maybe, or closer to all the way off the throttle to let the car turn more on the way in. You see you've got a little bit of uphill here, so it helps the car turn in, but you get a little bit more camber right towards the apex. So that's really where the car is going to turn, and maybe just a little bit more steering angle. I'd like to see that in the video or on the data just to know. Looking at lateral, you do see your peaks right there, kind of as you hit the curb, but certainly getting near the peak as you get into the apex, which is good, appropriate. But I would like to see. Again, if we just go through to the end, your full throttle is very close to the track out, and we see this long trough of roughly a third or a half throttle input, and kind of a little bit lazy, kind of slow coming off the throttle. So as you turn in there, I might go a little bit deeper, full throttle, just like we were talking at the last corner, a little bit longer, full throttle, then dropping it off a little bit more closer to flat or full off or maybe even full off, and that way you can start tipping in towards full throttle sooner. I'd like to see full throttle pretty close to right as you come off of the apex curbing. Just inch it forward a little bit here so you get your maximum lateral kind of right in this area as you hit the curb. If you got the car pretty well rotated, I would say full throttle about there. Again, still pretty steeply uphill. You can see it doesn't really crest until about where the track out is. You got a good bit of uphill here. So good grip on the way out here. I'd like to see full throttle a bit sooner. And then let's just see placement wise, I think there's a little bit of room out to the edge. Yeah, I mean, eventually you drive it out there, but you don't really need the curb. It would be nice for the car to at least track out right to the edge of the rumble, just getting it up on the ramp with the left sides a little bit there. And that'll give you plenty of time to kind of bring it back down before you get to that compression on the way up. Then as we go up over the crest, no issues here. Nice and smooth on power, and then braking right after we get over the top. No real issues with the braking necessarily. Maybe it could be a little bit higher peak, probably fractionally later, but that's not really my main complaint here. I would just suggest an earlier turn in, trying to maximize the corner here because this is a lot faster than the hairpin, and you're not really going to sacrifice the hairpin by tracking out here further. So I always turn in a little bit sooner here, certainly before this cone, about the halfway point of the curbing they have along the left side. Just back it up a fraction, kind of draw what I'm talking about. That's too much. So right there at the beginning of the curbing, if we call this halfway, if I'm starting to turn in, bend the car there, it makes it a lot less aggressive. Whereas if you go down towards this cone, then you have to turn a little sharper. And it looks subtle here, but right at this point, you're turning the car a lot more. So your minimum speed has to be earlier in the corner. Whereas I can decel kind of all the way down to the apex a little bit more, therefore carrying more entry speed for this whole early portion of the corner. It also makes my exit a little bit straighter because I'm going to track out all the way to the exit. So I'm just widening the radius of this corner as much as possible, trying to carry, this, I think your min speed is like 90 through here, trying to carry closer to 100 or so through the apex, and, just so you're maximizing this corner rather than the hairpin, which is more like 50 miles an hour. So trying to get that done. And then just play it through here. When you get to that curb, you're close, you're on the edge. It's not like you're totally missing the apex or anything, but try to get it up there. Another foot or so up the curb definitely will help straighten the radius out. So just, start to look at details a lot more, and that'll get you back to full throttle a little bit sooner as well. Overall, not a terrible tendency here with the throttle trace, but would like to see it full throttle just a little bit earlier and tracking it out closer to the left at least. Maybe not right on the curb, but definitely further out there. Closer to the left side here, not trying to sacrifice to get it back over to the right quite as much. And then we also want to see a trail brake a little bit longer. So if we just look at the brake trace over here on the side, a little bit slow reaching that peak, and then definitely a big, let off of brake pressure as you do your blip, and then kind of light here towards the end. And if I just inch it forward a little bit, we'll see your off brakes completely pretty early. So you just started to turn in, which is good. It's better than nothing, but you're off pretty early. And then again, if we watch your throttle trace, you're going to throttle very early. So that should kind of be a clue too, that any tighter corner where you're really early to power, it's a good indicator that you've overslowed the entry. So you're trying not to lose any more, but then you're messing up the weight balance of the car. So you're putting weight back to the rear, which is going to hurt that rotation through the middle. So I want to move this whole brake zone a little bit deeper, try to compress it a little bit. So it's probably starting down here, peaks up here, and then we're going to see a trail just a little bit longer, something like that into the corner. And then if we take roughly that distance over here, you might have even a little bit of roll period in the middle of the corner. Then you're starting with your throttle, and it'll start to go full a lot sooner because you're going to end up at this point here, and here, getting more rotation done because you're dragging the brakes a little bit further into the corner. You've got more weight on the front of the car. That nose is going to turn it a lot better as you go through the apex, which is roughly there where that vertical line is. And so that placement, or that timing of how you release the brake is going to help the car turn a lot quicker so that you spend less time at that minimum speed in the corner. And if we just watch that minimum speed I was talking about, 56, 55, it doesn't really start going up heavily until pretty late in the corner. Past the apex now, still 60. Now you're starting to pick up a little bit more throttle, 63, but we're not over 70 until track out, which is also about where you go to full throttle. So we want to be full throttle sooner. And again, that'll happen because the rotation will happen over a shorter period of time, right at the apex curving, where you've got, the most steering angle, the most lateral load, the car is going to turn really quick, and that'll straighten the drive off. So you're earlier to full throttle. That's always what we want to work on, is earlier to full throttle. If you're early to that tip in, that can really hurt rotation and hurt going to full throttle. So we get up here, nothing too dramatically wrong. You got a little tap of the brake on the way in, which is fine. You're completely off throttle, which is good, getting some rotation. I would stay a little bit early with the tip in. Just, again, lots of entry speed. Let that minimum speed be a little later in the corner, 90, 89. So you're still slowing down just a little bit past the apex, which is really where you want to be, adding power. And so trying to get that car to really rotate at or right before the apex curving so that you're going to power significantly. Sorry, I'm trying to look at the camera, look around the camera, which is kind of in the way. So that your full throttle is a little bit, let's see, sorry, I jumped. Again, trying not to spend all this time at partial throttle through the middle corner. Maybe a little bit longer off throttle, let it rotate, and then just around here, right as you're getting a couple car lengths from the curb, then start tipping in and full throttle somewhere around in here. So if we just draw that again, a little longer off throttle, start tipping in, and full throttle, rather than this big long flat line in the middle of the corner. and also trying to use a little bit more of the track out curbing once you get there. You're, again, right out to the white line. Or, you know, splitting hairs here, but I want to see just a couple inches, you know, half a tire on the curb coming off right at the end there. Ends a little bit abruptly, too early, you know, earlier than we would want as drivers, but you should be half a tire going over that little hole right there every lap, trying to use every inch of the road. Then as we go down here, off throttle nicely, looks like a pretty good brake. And if you watch this, I really like the trail brake release here. So really far into the corner, just coming off the throttle or off the brake completely. Basically, when you get to the apex, the placement is great. You know, you're right up to the higher portion of the curb. Love it, really good. Throttle time, you know, a little bit less time here spent at half throttle, which is better. But I think it could be marginally better yet. But I'm not going to, you know, tear this one apart. I think you get the idea from the other ones. Again, could be maybe fractionally earlier back to full throttle, but not too bad. Nothing majorly wrong here. The long drag of the brake is, you know, just inherent in this section of the track where you're never perfectly straight. You know, I know some guys straighten it up a little bit more, get a little harder on the brake, but then it's sometimes hard to get down to this apex. So I don't really see anything I hate through here. You know, I might complain a little bit again about that shape of the throttle on, but no big problems. The one thing I will talk about here a little bit is, again, how long you're at partial throttle and kind of just playing with the throttle, but also watch our G load as we go through here. So you've got your peak here pretty early, 1.5 G, and then kind of just trails down. And you're just playing with throttle a little bit, trying to, you know, balance the car, which is nothing terrible. Then it goes down to almost a G, I think 1.14 or something like that. So right here, before, you know, as you're kind of coming back, you're losing a lot of the lateral load, and I would say that's because you didn't drive it in hard enough. And it's, you know, it's a long, difficult corner to figure out. I think in general you have the right idea where you let the car out kind of mid-track and you bring it back to that second apex. And, you know, I start from inside like this. So nothing dramatically wrong, except I would say your brake is a little bit early. I would try to, you know, get in towards this curb a little bit, then brake a little harder, letting the car drag out here. Pretty much same placement, maybe just fractionally later, but by being just, you know, a few miles an hour faster and, you know, later on the brakes on the way in, I think you'll be closer to your peak lateral G for more of this corner. And then you also have the car a little bit straighter because you'll have more yaw angle. So because you're getting more rotation through the middle, then the car will be a little bit straighter coming off here. I think you'll be able to commit to full throttle right around in here. You know, so maybe 2 to 3 car lengths earlier than what you're doing right now. Again, splitting hairs here. This is not a terrible run through here, not a bad approach. I think just a few miles an hour faster in, trying to get closer to this curb on the left for your braking, and just, you know, marginally harder on the brake so the car's, you know, really seeing the limit laterally as it gets out to its widest point. Seeing a little more yaw angle, and then that'll help you get back to full throttle. But, you know, all this time seeing just half throttle is not ideal. And obviously it's a very long corner, so you're going to get some of that. It's not like you can go right back to throttle, but trying to be a little bit more conscious. If you just, you know, give it one big lift, sometimes it'll rotate enough that you can go then back to full throttle. So, you know, maybe you are going at this partial throttle for a long time. You might get down to this point, lift out of it most of the way, and then you can go back to full throttle a little bit quicker, something in that range, where you've got this little dip, but then you still end up flatline for quite a ways until you get basically straight, and then you floor it. You know, but doing that big lift, and then you might be able to get back to full throttle a little bit sooner. And then through the rest of the lap, I think looks, you know, good. No big drama here. Just running the shortest distance, rowing through the gears. Can maybe touch the curb, yeah. And then you go flat through here. So, you know, good speed, no issues there. Like I said, really nice lap, starting to really pick it apart. But definitely work on trying to get back to that full throttle a little bit sooner. Sometimes that means less partial throttle, earlier in the corner, letting the car rotate quicker. We want to see that car turn over the shortest distance possible right in the middle of the corner so that we straighten that drive off, get to 100% throttle a little bit sooner. You know, getting a little nitpicky with the brake zones, trying not to see those blips from as you're rolling the foot on the brake to do the blip. And then, you know, really high, quick peak brake pressure, a little bit longer trail into the corner like we saw at turn 9, I think it was, or 8. Yeah, really good laps. I think the next step really for you for finding, you know, every 10th would be getting, you know, a pro data lap to compare to maybe, so that you can really start nitpicking on what the absolute limit of the car is and seeing, you know, where I can pick out a few miles an hour more or less. But overall, really good. Hope some of these little details will help you, though. Let us know how it goes. Thanks.